In the heart of Genoa City, as the final week of May slowly unfolded, the air seemed heavier than usual, thick with anticipation, unresolved tension, and the underlying pulse of secrets waiting for the right moment to explode. It was within this atmosphere that Audra Charles, ever the opportunist, decided to orchestrate a gathering that would appear on the surface as nothing more than a casual, spontaneous celebration. But anyone who had come to know Audra well enough would understand that nothing she did was truly random. Every gesture, every invitation, every glance held a calculated purpose. And so, when she extended an invitation to Kyle Abbott, she did so with the clear intent of seizing an opening, a fleeting moment that could tilt the balance of power in her favor, even if just for a night. The penthouse suite where Audra chose to host the party was impeccably prepared. Dim lighting to set an intimate mood, a playlist that oscillated between soft jazz and ambient electronic beats, and, of course, a selection of top-shelf liquors lined up on the marble counter. The air was tinged with the faint aroma of expensive perfume and the promise of unpredictability. Audra made certain the scene was set, not only for pleasure but also for potential leverage. She believed that every social gathering was an arena, and tonight, Kyle was her singular focus. Kyle Abbott arrived punctually, dressed in a way that blended effortless charm with a hint of restlessness, a subtle signal to anyone watching that he was, perhaps, searching for something even he couldn't define. The last few months had not been kind to Kyle. The pressures of family legacy, career turbulence, and the emotional detritus left by failed relationships had all left their marks. Audra, with her uncanny ability to sense vulnerability, recognized this immediately and knew it was the perfect time to strike, not with malice, but with the calculated warmth of someone who understood how loneliness could make even the strongest souls let down their guard. The first glasses of wine were poured, and conversation danced around familiar topics, business updates, family gossip, the absurdity of Genoa City's endless drama. Both Audra and Kyle wore practiced smiles, careful not to reveal too much too soon. But beneath the surface, there was a subtle undercurrent, a mutual recognition that this evening, for all its pretense, was more than just a social call. It was an audition for trust, perhaps for something more dangerous than friendship. As the night deepened and the drinks kept flowing, Audra gradually shifted the conversation, steering it from the mundane toward the personal. She let her guard down just enough to hint at her own isolation, the unspoken burdens she carried, the sense that she was always an outsider fighting for a seat at a table built by and for powerful men. Kyle, half-guarded and yet increasingly at ease, responded in kind. He admitted to his own sense of alienation, the heavy crown of Abbott heritage, the feeling that no matter what he achieved, it would never be enough to silence the doubts in his own heart. The moment of truth arrived sooner than either of them expected. With a sly but genuine smile, Audra proposed a partnership of sorts. She made it sound light-hearted, but every syllable dripped with intent. "We're both tired of playing by other people's rules," she said, her eyes locked on his. "Maybe it's time to start making our own." Kyle, surprisingly, hesitated. He looked away, swirling the wine in his glass, considering not just her words but the implications behind them. He had been burned before, by women, by friends, even by family. Trust did not come easily anymore. "I'm not sure it's that simple," he replied, his voice low. "Partnerships like the one you're proposing, they come with strings, and I'm not sure either of us is ready for the fallout." Audra did not flinch. Instead, she leaned in closer, the challenge in her voice as sharp as ever. "I find it hard to believe you don't see the benefit in this, for both of us. You and I, together, could do things in this town no one else could even imagine." For a moment, the tension between them was almost tangible. Outside the windows, the city lights shimmered, oblivious to the high-stakes game being played in the shadows. Inside, the alcohol dulled inhibitions but heightened every emotion, every glance, every word. The scene, to an outside observer, might have seemed innocent, two attractive, ambitious people sharing drinks and secrets. But in Genoa City, innocence was always a mask. The clock ticked on, and the conversation moved in circles, each pass drawing them closer together and yet never quite crossing the line. Glasses were refilled, laughter became a little louder, shoulders brushed accidentally on purpose. It was never clear which one of them began to let their guard down first, or which was the predator and which the prey. That was the beauty, and the danger, of such nights. As the hours dragged on, the lines between business and pleasure, trust and suspicion, desire and self-preservation blurred until neither Audra nor Kyle could recall exactly how the evening had started. They were both aware, on some level, that they were dancing on the edge of something they couldn't easily take back. One more drink, one more word, one more lingering look, and the world as they knew it might tilt on its axis. It was Audra who finally pushed the envelope, perhaps emboldened by the alcohol or by her own relentless ambition. She stood, walking over to the record player to change the music. As she moved, her hand brushed Kyle's shoulder, an accidental touch, but one charged with meaning. She selected a slower song, something with a plaintive piano melody, and let it fill the room with its melancholic beauty. Then she turned to him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of weakness, any crack in the armor. "We don't have to make any decisions tonight," she said softly. "But I think you know as well as I do, nothing changes if nothing changes." Kyle didn't answer immediately. He watched her, measuring the risk, weighing the reward. He knew, even as he sat there, that he was playing with fire. Audra was many things, dangerous, ambitious, magnetic. She could offer him escape, or entrapment, or perhaps both in equal measure. He remembered, with sudden clarity, all the warnings he'd heard about her, all the whispered rumors that followed her like a shadow. But he also remembered the way loneliness could make even the wisest men reckless, and he wondered if tonight was destined to be one of those nights he'd regret, or one he'd never forget. The music played on, and for a moment, they simply sat in silence. Outside, the city hummed with possibility. Inside, two people on the cusp of something reckless lingered in the dim glow, neither quite willing to take the final step, but neither willing to let the night end just yet. The question that hung over them was simple and yet infinitely complex: would they give in to the moment, letting alcohol and longing dictate their actions, or would caution, and the memory of all they had to lose, prevail? In Genoa City, the difference between a new beginning and utter disaster often came down to a single decision made in the heat of the moment. As midnight slipped quietly into morning, it remained unclear which direction the night would take. Perhaps they would simply part as friends, their secrets intact, their ambitions still carefully concealed. Or perhaps, just as the rest of the city slept, Audra and Kyle would make a choice that would ripple outward, touching not just their own lives but the fates of everyone around them. Because in this world, nothing stayed hidden for long, and one reckless night could change everything. When the first rays of sunlight slipped through the blinds, Audra was the first to stir, her mind hazy but her instincts sharp as ever. She glanced at Kyle, noting the vulnerability etched across his features, the hint of uncertainty in his posture. In that moment, she knew that whatever had or hadn't happened between them, the power dynamic had shifted. They were no longer just two ambitious souls playing at partnership, they were now conspirators in a secret that could, at any moment, explode into the light. The aftermath of such nights in Genoa City was never tidy. Gossip would spread, suspicions would mount, and both Audra and Kyle would have to reckon with the consequences of the choices they made, or didn't make. For Audra, the night represented another calculated risk, another move in a game that never really ended. For Kyle, it was a reminder of just how easy it was to slip, how thin the line was between control and chaos. As they parted ways, neither of them quite certain what the future would hold, one thing became clear. The events of that night would echo long after the final glass was emptied, weaving their way into the tangled fabric of alliances, betrayals, and ambitions that defined Genoa City. And in a place where everyone had something to hide, Audra and Kyle now had a secret all their own, a secret that might one day come to define them both. Because in Genoa City, the night never truly ends. It simply waits, patient and hungry, for the next secret to be born in the dense atmosphere of Genoa City, with only a thin wall separating the two spaces. Audra Charles's every move and every thought is planned with ingenuity and cold ambition. She is no longer a woman who is easily swayed by fate, on the contrary, Audra is becoming the driver of her own destiny, not even afraid to control those who think they are the strongest in this city. And tonight, her target is Kyle Abbott. A man who is just a few steps away from her, but has been pushed deeper into a game of chess without his knowledge. It all started when Audra heard about the rift and suspicion between Kyle and Claire. This instability is not only a small crack in their personal relationship, but also the key that helps Audra get closer to her goal of controlling the financial destiny of her company, which is still in the hands of Victor Newman. If she can get Kyle and Claire to break up, if their relationship implodes in scandal, Audra will not only gain a huge advantage in power but also maintain a vital cash flow from Victor. In her world, nothing is more important than surviving and winning, even if it means using the most ruthless means. The decisive moment comes when Audra learns that Kyle will be attending a cocktail party she has carefully arranged. Everything in the room is prepared to create an intimate atmosphere, ready to deceive both emotions and reason. Soft yellow lights, melodious background music, carefully selected glasses of wine, all are designed to create intimacy, to blur the lines of caution. But Kyle is not naive. The shocks of the past have kept him on his guard, not allowing himself to be swept away by any temptation too easily. However, Audra is a master of emotional manipulation. She knew how to create romantic moments, stories that evoked the past, or simply accidental touches that were enough to ignite a spark of curiosity in Kyle. Sometimes, he was swept away by the flow of emotions, but as soon as he realized he was getting close to the dangerous line, he stepped back, reminding himself not to make another mistake. He knew Audra was irresistible, but he understood more clearly how dangerous she was. As the night wore on, Kyle's senses became more fragile due to the slight intoxication. Audra realized that he had begun to lower his guard, and this was the right time to take action. A moment of silence passed, and with cold calculation, Audra gently dropped a few drops of the strange substance into Kyle's glass of wine. A drug that was not too strong, just enough to make him fall into a state of drowsiness, unable to control his actions, and the next morning he would not remember what had really happened. Audra wasn't worried, because she had considered all the risks. She wouldn't leave a trace, nor would she literally dirty her hands. As Kyle began to feel dizzy, Audra gently guided him toward the large bed, capturing every moment to create explicit photos, enough to make anyone who looked at them doubt the nature of their relationship. Audra knew that with just a few blurry photos, a little skillful acting, she could weave the perfect story of betrayal. The next morning, Claire would have no reason to trust Kyle, and Victor Newman would have all the more reason to continue to keep her. The only person who knew how to control the undercurrents in Genoa City, but also the one who was willing to eliminate anyone who dared to stand in his way. Audra felt the adrenaline rush as everything went according to plan. The photos were taken from many angles, enough that Claire would freeze in pain and anger when she saw them. Audra didn't need to lie, because the pictures spoke for themselves. As the morning drew near, she tidied up the room, erased any suspicious traces, and carefully put Kyle's phone back where it belonged so as not to arouse his suspicions. She also tidied everything up herself so that no one could accuse her of anything. When Kyle woke up, he felt a splitting headache, his memory was muddled, and his body was unusually tired. He vaguely remembered the party, but any memories of what had actually happened that night were blurry and unclear. Audra still appeared calm, gently asking questions, pretending that nothing was wrong. This made Kyle even more confused, but he had no evidence to suspect anything. In his mind, there were only blurry images of the party, fragments of conversations, and a vague but inexplicable feeling of guilt. As for Kyle, he was bewildered when he realized that Claire's attitude had completely changed, cold, distant, and unwilling to listen to any explanation. His feeble efforts only made Claire more painful. Everything happened so fast that he lost control, not realizing that he was falling into a trap that had been meticulously set from beginning to end. As for Audra, she stood outside and observed everything, holding in her hands the vivid evidence of that fateful night, ready to use them to keep Victor's sponsorship, keep her position intact, and completely destroy the threat named Claire. But the game of power in Genoa City has never been a simple game. Audra understood that no matter how successful this plan was, she would become a target in the eyes of those who were unforgiving. Once Kyle or Claire realized that they were being manipulated, turned into pawns in her hands, all the consequences would come back to haunt Audra herself. However, her survival instinct and thirst for power pushed Audra beyond all moral boundaries. She was willing to confront anyone, including Victor, Kyle or Claire, as long as her ultimate goal was guaranteed. And so, after a long night filled with alcohol, tricks and ambiguous moments between reality and fantasy, the fates of 3 people, Kyle, Claire, Audra, were forever changed. No one was innocent enough to trust, no one could remain pure in the face of sweet and bitter temptations and betrayals. Each person's true nature was gradually exposed, leaving an irreparable rift in their souls. That was the price they had to pay for daring to play the game of power on the Genoa City chessboard, where just one night could destroy everything, and turn the wisest people into victims of their own schemes. After all, when the night ended, a cold silence covered every corner. Audra sat quietly in the empty room, looking at the photos on her phone, smiling with satisfaction but also a little worried about the future ahead. Meanwhile, Kyle, with a constant headache and a heavy heart, began to understand that sometimes vigilance alone is not enough to fight against sophisticated plots, especially when the opponent is an Audra Charles who is willing to do everything for power and survival. Their world will no longer be the same. And it all started with a night of drinking arranged by Audra, where everything that seemed harmless became the starting point for a new series of tragedies that will haunt Genoa City for many days and months to come.